Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM Today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Tuesday, 8th July 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. United States. The U.S. is viewed as both the most important ally and the greatest threat by citizens in 25 middle and high-income countries, according to a recent Pew Research Center survey. President Donald Trump has expressed dissatisfaction with Russia and Vladimir Putin, considering sanctions against them, stating that Putin is killing a lot of people and expressing being tired of the B from his Russian counterpart. Trump is considering imposing a 50% tariff on copper imports, of which the U.S. imports approximately half of its needs for construction, transportation, and electronics. Trump has threatened tariffs starting August 1 against several countries, including Japan and South Korea, prompting the EU to seek a deal beforehand. Trump officially extended the deadline to impose reciprocal tariffs on dozens of economic partners to August 1st, indicating his seriousness this time. These tariffs, including 25% unilateral tariffs on Japan and South Korea, and equal or higher import taxes on several other nations, have raised anxiety in Taiwan, which awaits the outcome of its tariff negotiations, fearing duties of 25% or higher. US envoy Steve Witkoff suggests a Gaza ceasefire deal is close, with Washington hopeful for a 60-day truce between Israel and Hamas by the end of the week. Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting with Trump to discuss this potential deal and its implications for Palestinians in Gaza. The Trump administration is expanding scrutiny of Chinese and other foreign ownership of American farmland and starting to cancel agricultural contracts with entities from countries of concern amid national security concerns. The U.S. Supreme Court has cleared the way for the Trump administration to resume plans for mass firings of federal workers, a move critics warn could threaten critical government services. Travelers are no longer required to remove their shoes for security screenings at US airports, as the TSA has abandoned this measure in place since 2001. Questions are mounting about the government response to deadly storms and flooding in Texas, specifically regarding actions taken by local officials to warn campers and residents. The State Department has issued a warning about imposters using AI to impersonate Secretary of State Marco Rubio and possibly other officials to contact foreign and U.S. officials. Russia confirmed the death of Roman V. Starovoyt, the transport minister, hours after the Kremlin dismissed him. Reports indicate he died by suicide. Starovoyt governed the Kursk region before Ukrainian forces occupied part of it in 2024. A Ukrainian attack on a beach in Russia's Kursk region resulted in 3 deaths and 7 injuries, with 5 of the injured, including a 5-year-old child, in serious condition. Russia's main election monitor, Golos, announced its closure due to an ongoing crackdown, stating it had no choice as the sentencing put its participants at risk. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said Russia could pose a security threat to the EU by the end of the decade, emphasizing the need to ramp up defense industries in Europe and Ukraine. 5 countries plan to revive the use of landmines, a weapon prohibited by treaty, to fortify Europe's borders against potential Russian attacks. Hyde, a Michelin-starred restaurant in London owned by dissident Russian Yevgeny Chichvakin, was the target of an arson plot directed by Russian operatives, with a criminal gang in Britain carrying out the attack. China's International Organization for Mediation, IOMAID, made a high-profile debut in Hong Kong in May, with Foreign Minister Wang Yi stressing the importance of resolving international disagreements. A new survey indicates that the U.S. is more likely than China to be seen as both the most important ally and greatest threat by citizens in 25 middle and high-income countries. Diplomatic observers believe that tariffs imposed by the U.S. are unlikely to push Japan and South Korea closer to China, but the trade tensions could create an opportunity for China to offer stronger incentives to enhance trilateral cooperation with Tokyo and Seoul. The U.S. administration is expanding scrutiny of Chinese and other foreign ownership of American farmland and starting to cancel agricultural contracts with entities from countries of concern amid national security concerns. Ukraine launched an attack on a beach in Russia's Kursk region, resulting in 3 deaths and 7 injuries. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has called for defense industries in Europe and Ukraine to be ramped up due to a potential security threat from Russia. European Union. French President Emmanuel Macron warned that European countries need to reduce their dual dependencies on the US and China, outlining his vision of an empowered, wider Europe during a state visit to the UK. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said Russia could pose a security threat to the EU by the end of the decade. 5 countries are planning to revive the use of landmines, a weapon prohibited by treaty, to fortify Europe's borders against potential Russian attacks. United Kingdom. The UK saw Hyde, a Michelin-starred restaurant in London, become the target of an arson plot directed by Russian operatives, with a criminal gang in Britain carrying out the attack. Court proceedings revealed how a criminal gang in Britain was directed to target Yevgeny Chichvarkin, a dissident Russian who owns the restaurant in Mayfair. French President Emmanuel Macron outlined his vision of an empowered, wider Europe during a state visit to the UK. A review of criminal courts in England and Wales may recommend scrapping jury trials for certain offences to reduce backlog. Sir Brian Arson's independent inquiry suggests this change. Gaza, Israel. Israel's potential ceasefire deal in Gaza is nearing, according to us, envoy Steve Witkoff. Washington is hopeful for a 60-day truce between Israel and Hamas by the end of the week. Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting with Trump to discuss a potential Gaza ceasefire deal and what it means for Palestinians in Gaza. Japan and South Korea. Japan and South Korea are among the countries that received letters from Trump threatening tariffs starting August 1. Diplomatic observers believe that tariffs imposed by the U.S. are unlikely to push Japan and South Korea closer to China. Trump, impatient with negotiations, imposed 25% unilateral tariffs on Japan and South Korea. China is facing increased international competition and scrutiny over its trade practices, technological advancements, and geopolitical strategies. The country's dominance in the rare earth supply chain is being challenged by the US and Europe, both seeking alternative sources. A factory in La Rochelle, France, owned by Solvay, aims to produce materials needed for cars, wind turbines, and military equipment, signaling Europe's intent to reduce dependence on China. Beijing's recent export controls on rare earths have spurred a flurry of international efforts to diversify supply chains, though the Ministry of Commerce stated it would approve qualified export applications and was open to discussions with other countries regarding the restrictions in June. Chinese researchers are claiming a breakthrough in radio technology that could enable military units to communicate without broadcasting their location, thus eliminating the risk of interception, jamming, and missile strike. The country's advances in high-performance chips, including the Meteor 1 parallel optical computing integrated chip, could transform the artificial intelligence industry. The National Development and Reform Commission, NDRC, China's top economic planner, is enhancing its economic monitoring and early warning capabilities amid threats of erratic U.S. tariffs. China's forex reserves are getting a boost from the weakening dollar. High-speed railway network expansion continues, positioning it as a cornerstone for the Belt and Road Initiative, according to Vice Premier Zhang Guoqing. China added more than 4.4 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity in the first 6 months of the year, the same amount it added in all of 2024, and is expected to add at least 90 more. Deadly floods hit the China-Nepal border, leaving 8 dead and 31 missing. 8 people have been detained in China after high lead levels were detected in kindergarten children in Gansu province. In foreign relations, China states the U.S. is in no position to point fingers over Tibet issues, following Marco Rubio's message. European Commission. President Ursula von der Leyen has strongly criticized China's stance on Russia and its trade policies, stating that the outlook for the upcoming China-EU summit is getting increasingly gloomy, with the 2-day summit reduced in scope. Turning to the United States, the U.S. is actively seeking to reduce its strategic dependence on China, particularly in the area of rare earths, which are emerging as a geopolitical linchpin in the rising China-U.S. rivalry. The U.S. president's latest volley of tariffs heavily targets Asian countries, including Japan, South Korea, and Indonesia, in what many experts say is part of a strategy to force them to reduce trade with China. The U.S. president signed an executive order to extend a pause on reciprocal tariffs until August 1st, which is offering little comfort to China. Washington also moved to target 14 countries, many of them China's close trading partners, with tariffs of up to 40%. The U.S. has also criticized China's human rights record, with China responding that the U.S. is in no position to point fingers over Tibet issues. Republicans are questioning Harvard University's ties with China, alleging that the university cultivated these ties to bolster its finances. In France, the focus is on reducing dependence on China for rare earths. The rare earth factory in La Rochelle, owned by Solvay, aims to produce materials needed for cars, wind turbines, and military equipment. Finally, the European Union is becoming increasingly critical of China. The European Commission. President Ursula von der Leyen has strongly criticized China's stance on Russia and its trade policies, stating that the outlook for the upcoming China-EU summit is getting increasingly gloomy, with the 2-day summit reduced in scope. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims a social media campaign is fueling declining U.S. support for Israel, accusing unnamed actors of vilifying and demonizing the nation. Netanyahu reportedly met with then-President Trump to discuss a Gaza ceasefire, with Trump's envoy suggesting an impending truce between Israel and Hamas. During a White House visit, Netanyahu nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Officials from Israel and Hamas are also engaged in ceasefire negotiations in Qatar, with Hamas seeking guarantees for a permanent end to the Gaza war. Meanwhile, a UN expert, Francesca Albanese, suggests global firms profiting from Israeli actions in Gaza could be prosecuted for aiding genocide. The ongoing conflict has resulted in the deaths of 5 Israeli soldiers in Gaza and 5 more in northern Gaza due to explosive devices and militant fire. Palestinian health officials report 18 deaths from Israeli strikes. An Israeli strike in northern Lebanon killed at least 3 people, targeting a key figure from Hamas near Tripoli. Reports depict bloodied children from a Gaza City tent camp allegedly struck by Israeli shelling, raising alarm about civilian safety in displaced persons camps. Amid the Israeli blockade, the UN is pleading for fuel for Gaza, citing critical conditions with hospitals rationing, ambulances stalling, and water systems nearing collapse. Reports indicate that Israel plans to confine Gaza's population to a closed border zone, a move critics deem a forcible displacement violating international law, given the offensive and blockade making Gaza uninhabitable. Israel's defense minister has outlined a plan to forcibly transfer 600,000 Palestinians from Gaza to a tent city on ruins. The UK advertising watchdog ASA has outlawed advertising prescription-only medications, including weight loss injections, to the public. Former UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has joined Goldman Sachs as a senior advisor. Top British diplomat David Lammy has criticized the US-backed aid distribution mechanism in Gaza as ineffective, threatening further action against Israel if a ceasefire proposal fails. The Bayeux Tapestry will be displayed in the UK for the first time in almost 1,000 years. Former British Conservative politician Norman Tebbit has died at 94. President Emmanuel Macron's state visit to Britain aims for practical results regarding migrants and Ukraine. At least 13 people are believed to have died by suicide as a result of Britain's post office scandal. Lindsay and Craig Foreman, a British couple, have been held in Iran since January on espionage charges. Turning to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the Kremlin said it will take time to clarify what weapons the U.S. will send Ukraine, while appreciating President Trump's efforts to initiate direct negotiations. President Trump blasted Putin after announcing more weapons to Ukraine, accusing him of distracting Washington and expressing dissatisfaction with the ongoing war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he had urged officials to intensify contact with the U.S. Ukraine is employing low-tech solutions like fishing nets to defend against Russian drones. A UK court convicted 3 men of arson for an attack ordered by Russia's Wagner mercenary group, targeting a London industrial unit storing generators and Starlink devices destined for Ukraine. Japan faces rising social security premiums, increasing from E26.7 trillion in fiscal 2000 to E40.7 trillion in fiscal 2020. 22. Corporate bankruptcies in the first half of 2025 have reached an 11-year high, intensified by labor shortages. Grandma rental services are emerging to aid the aging population, offering income opportunities and easing cost of living pressures amid inflation. Businesses and local governments are also collaborating to support parents' aftercare programs for their disabled children. And in international affairs, Japan is navigating trade tensions with the United States. President Donald Trump plans to impose a 25% tariff on Japanese imports, slightly higher than the initially proposed 24%. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has met with cabinet ministers to strategize in response to the tariffs, though his efforts to reduce the U.S. trade deficit have apparently backfired. Despite the tariff threat, Japan is holding firm in its negotiating position, especially concerning auto exports. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent may visit Japan next week as part of the U.S. delegation to the World Exposition in Osaka. The Japanese government is also addressing crimes committed by foreign residents. Prime Minister Ishiba has announced a control tower within the Cabinet Secretariat to foster an orderly and inclusive society with foreign residents. The Emperor and Empress of Japan mourned Japanese who died in Mongolia, marking the first time a Japanese emperor has mourned at a site where Japanese people were detained abroad. Japan is also planning deep-sea drilling near Minamitō-shima to extract rare earths and reduce its reliance on overseas suppliers, a move that raises environmental concerns. In sports, Tottenham has signed Japanese international defender Kota Takai from Kawasaki Frontale for a reported £5. The 20-year-old centre-back has agreed to a 5-year deal with the Europa League winners and has made 4 appearances for Japan's national team. France recently saw President Emmanuel Macron making a state visit to Britain, the first such visit by a French leader in 16 years. He was hosted by King Charles and the royal family. As a symbol of Franco-British relations, the Bayeux Tapestry will be displayed at the British Museum in London from September 2026 to July 2027. Meanwhile, a wildfire near Marseille has destroyed homes, injured 9 firefighters, and forced the evacuation of about 400 people. Over 1,000 firefighters are combating the blaze, with Marseille Airport suspending flights. Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau hopes the fire can be contained if the winds decrease. The country is also on alert due to the discovery of Japanese beetles, which pose a threat to various crops, including plum trees, apple trees, and vines. In cultural news, the Aix-en-Provence Festival's performances are being broadcast to remote audiences. Australia is navigating economic headwinds, particularly those linked to global trade friction and the US levy regime, according to Treasurer Jim Chalmers. Rabia Deputy Hauser has specifically pointed to the profound impact of former US President Trump's trade war on the global economy. Prime Minister Albanese is preparing for a visit to China from July 12 to 18, where trade deals between the two countries are expected to be reviewed. Australians could cut their power bills dramatically by enhancing home energy efficiency, according to a recent report. Luke Menzel, CEO of the Energy Efficiency Council, stresses the significance of managing energy consumption through solar power, batteries, and efficient appliances. The Australian mushroom triple murder trial involving Aaron Patterson, who was found guilty of 3 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder after 3 guests died, and 1 almost died after eating her homemade baked Wellington lunch, has garnered international attention. Patterson told the trial that she made multiple changes to Resapidin Eats Cook Nagi Mehashi's beef Wellington recipe when preparing the fatal lunch 2 years ago, much to Mehashi's dismay. The United States remains central to global trade anxieties, with the potential impact of President Trump's trade war casting a long shadow. The Australian government is urgently seeking clarity after Trump threatened to impose 200% tariffs on foreign pharmaceuticals. These tariffs are scheduled to take effect on August 1, 2025, without any possibility of extensions. China has formally announced that Australia's Prime Minister Albanese will visit the country from July 12 to 18. The visit is expected to include a review of the existing trade agreements between China and Australia. Transitioning to New Zealand, Australian gold mine company Santana Minerals is acquiring Ada Station in Otago for $25 million. This purchase has faced some resistance from residents in Taras. Yemen's escalating Houthi attacks in the Red Sea are disrupting global shipping. The rebels have intensified their targeting of vessels, a crucial route for oil and commodities. This has led to a noticeable decrease in traffic since November 2023. A drone and speedboat attack on the Eternity Sea, a Greek-owned Liberian-flagged bulk carrier, resulted in the tragic deaths of 2 seafarers. This follows a previous attack on the bulk carrier Magic Seas, which the Houthis claim to have sunk. Another suspected Houthi attack on a Red Sea vessel resulted in 3 fatalities. While the Houthi group hasn't claimed responsibility for every incident, they have openly declared ships with ties to Israel as legitimate targets. These recent assaults mark the first major escalation since a truce was announced, raising serious concerns about maritime security in the region. Mexico is seeing collaborative efforts with the United States as volunteer firefighters from the country assisted in search and rescue operations in Texas after devastating flooding. At the same time, U.S. tariffs are boosting business for some Mexican manufacturers. However, internally, Mexico City is experiencing protests against gentrification. Rising rents and food prices are making it difficult for long-time residents to afford housing. Haiti's renowned Hotel Oloffson in Port-au-Prince, a cultural landmark embodying the nation's turbulent history, has been destroyed in an apparent arson. The iconic Gothic gingerbread building, once a sanctuary for artists and a reflection of Haitian politics, had been shuttered due to escalating gang violence. Originally built as a private residence around 1886 and later transformed into a hotel in 1936, the Oloffson gained fame through Graham Greene's novel, The Comedians. The hotel's demise has sparked widespread mourning among Haitians and international admirers, marking a significant loss for the nation's cultural heritage. Brazil is enhancing its global trade relationships, with President Lula and Indian Prime Minister Modi committing to triple bilateral trade amidst potential U.S. tariff concerns. Further solidifying its infrastructure ambitions, Brazil has partnered with China to explore building a transcontinental railway connecting the Atlantic and Pacific coasts via Peru. Domestically, a school attack in Rio Grande do Sul resulted in the tragic death of a 9-year-old child and injuries to 2 others. Kenya is currently gripped by intense anti-government protests that have tragically led to at least 31 fatalities and a multitude of injuries. Citizens are vehemently protesting against President William Ruto's administration, voicing concerns over police brutality, perceived governmental inadequacies, accusations of corruption, and the escalating cost of living, with many demanding his resignation. Law enforcement has reacted to these demonstrations using live ammunition, tear gas, and water cannons. The recent death of blogger Albert Ojwang, while in police custody, has further intensified public anger and added fuel to the already volatile situation. Afghanistan is now at the center of international scrutiny as the International Criminal Court, ICC, has issued arrest warrants for Taliban Supreme Leader Hibatullah Akhundzada and Afghan Chief Justice Abdul Hakim Haqqani. The ICC alleges reasonable grounds to believe Akhundzada and Haqqani are responsible for policies systematically depriving Afghan women and girls of fundamental rights. These rights include access to education, privacy, family life, and freedoms of movement, expression, thought, conscience, and religion. The ICC classifies these restrictions as persecution, constituting crimes against humanity. In response, the Taliban has dismissed the ICC's accusations as unfounded and reiterated its non-recognition of the International Court. Malaysia is seeing a surge in religious conservatism, particularly among younger Malay voters, which is boosting support for more conservative Islamic policies. In legal developments, former First Lady Rosmah Mansor won 100,000 ringgit, us $23,600, in damages in her defamation case against a TikTok user who claimed she practiced black magic. The Kuala Lumpur High Court sided with Rosmah, finding that she successfully proved her claim against Ku Muhammad Hilmi Ku Din. Law enforcement is currently searching for a Hindu priest accused of molesting beauty Queen Lashalini Kanaran at the Mariamman Temple in Sepang, while purportedly giving her a blessing. Kanaran brought the allegations to light via social media. On the economic front, Malaysia plans to pursue trade negotiations with the United States to establish a comprehensive trade agreement with the aim of lessening the impact of the recently enacted 25% tariff on Malaysian exports imposed by the U.S. South Korea saw former Japanese Minister Shigeru Ishiba express gratitude to outgoing South Korean envoy Park Kyo-hee, looking forward to continued cooperation under President Lee. U.S. President Donald Trump suggested South Korea should increase its financial contributions for its military protection. Trump also announced 25% tariffs on imports from several trade partners, including South Korea, prompting an emergency meeting in the South Korean presidential office. A Starbucks near the DMZ at Ajibong Peace Ecological Park has drawn attention, serving over 120,000 customers in 7 months, thanks to its unique views into North Korea. Following the recent conflict with Israel, Iran has refuted claims made by President Trump regarding impending negotiations with the U.S., despite assertions from Trump and his Middle East envoy about potential talks following comments from the Iranian president. Iran denies any scheduled discussions. The nation also minimized the impact of the Israeli bombardment, while confirming a death toll of at least 1,060 people. In a diplomatic move, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi traveled to Saudi Arabia, marking his first visit since the war, and engaged in discussions with Saudi Crown Prince MBs. In Jeddah, in Canada, authorities arrested 4 individuals, including active military personnel, accused of plotting to form an anti-government militia and seize territory in Quebec. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, displayed evidence of military-style training and revealed the recovery of a substantial weapons cache, including explosives and assault rifles. Law enforcement officials have characterized this seizure as the most significant in Canadian terrorism investigation history. Maynard is currently embroiled in a bloody conflict that has led to thousands of prisoners of war being held by rebel forces, a stark contrast to the few captives held by the junta. This civil war has deeply impacted families, with some experiencing rare moments of reunion amidst the chaos. Simultaneously, Myanmar's military rulers are actively working to block East Timor's accession to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Arson, advising against any interaction with opposition groups in the conflict-ridden nation, and formally informing Malaysia of their decision to oppose East Timor's membership. El Salvador's government admitted to UN investigators that the Trump administration retains authority over individuals deported from the U.S. to a Salvadoran prison. In a separate diplomatic matter, a U.S. deal aimed at exchanging Venezuelans detained in El Salvador for American prisoners fell apart. The failure stemmed from conflicting negotiation strategies between Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the U.S. envoy to Venezuela, each pursuing independent agreements. Qatar is actively involved in mediating indirect discussions between Israel and Hamas to broker a ceasefire in Gaza. Although both parties initially agreed to a U.S.-backed proposal for a 60-day halt in fighting, with the possibility of a permanent resolution, Qatari officials report sluggish advancement. Foreign Ministry spokesman Maïd al-Ansari has cautioned that achieving a Gaza ceasefire will necessitate further negotiations, refraining from setting a definitive timeline for a potential accord, despite earlier optimistic remarks from Trump about a possible agreement. Fiji faces a mix of political speculation and economic warnings. A Fijian political commentator anticipates that the son of Fiji's first prime minister may be drawn into politics upon achieving chiefly status, reflecting the nation's unpredictable political landscape. In economic news, the Reserve Bank of Fiji and the local TV network have issued warnings about a fraudulent investment scheme circulating on social media. The scheme uses a video falsely depicting the Reserve Bank of Fiji governor promoting a get-rich-quick opportunity. Meanwhile, Barbara Malimali, the former head of Fiji's anti-corruption agency, intends to challenge the findings of an inquiry that led to her suspension by Prime Minister Sativani Rabuka on May 29. The inquiry described her as universally corrupt, and Malimali claims her career has been unfairly destroyed. The Philippines will bolster its naval power with 6 Abukuma-class destroyer escorts from Japan, enhancing its anti-submarine warfare capabilities, with a Philippine team scheduled to inspect the vessels in Japan. Simultaneously, the United States has deployed its F-35 fighter aircraft to the Philippines for the first time as part of the Cope Thunder joint air drills, a move highlighting forward combat readiness amid heightened tensions in the South China Sea. These exercises take place against the backdrop of China's growing maritime assertiveness in the region. Adding to the friction, the Philippine Foreign Ministry summoned Chinese ambassador Huang Xilian after China imposed a travel ban on former Senator Francis Tolentino because of his stance on the South China Sea dispute. The United States, under President Donald Trump, implemented a 25% tariff on goods from Japan and South Korea, alongside 12 other nations, effective August 1. This action followed accusations that Japan was not importing enough rice and cars from the United States. United States authorities are moving to dismantle the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board, the agency that investigated the 2021 nitrogen leak in Georgia, which killed 6 workers. Adding to tensions, Spanish-language journalist Mario Guevara remains in ICE custody in Folkestone, Georgia, even after an immigration judge granted him bond. ICE has reportedly refused to accept his family's bond payment. Spain is battling intense wildfires amidst a severe heat wave. The blazes are straining resources across the country. Simultaneously in France, a significant fire near Narbonne disrupted travel. The Marseille airport was temporarily shut down due to the proximity of the flames. Across Europe, weather agencies are closely monitoring the situation. They anticipate rising temperatures in other regions throughout the week. Nepal is grappling with the aftermath of deadly flash floods triggered by monsoon rains along its border with China. At least 8 people have died. Dozens more are missing as rescue teams navigate challenging conditions. The floods also destroyed a crucial bridge at the border. This damage is significantly hindering transportation and complicating ongoing rescue operations. French President Emmanuel Macron has called for the United Kingdom and Europe to de-risk relationships with the United States and China. He urged a reduction in over-reliance on both global powers. Macron clarified that he does not view China and the U.S. as equivalent entities in this context. India's capital, New Delhi, continues to grapple with severe air pollution, retaining its status as the most polluted capital city worldwide. Adding to the environmental concerns, Banihat, an industrial town in northeast India, has been identified as the world's most polluted city. Efforts in New Delhi to mitigate the air quality crisis have encountered obstacles, notably the suspension of a vehicle scrappage policy. This policy aimed at curbing emissions by restricting refueling and impounded vehicles, petrol cars over 15 years and diesel vehicles over 10 years, faced pushback from residents. In the United States, President Donald Trump has suggested the new tariff deadline may be flexible. Concurrently, the U.S. has enforced tariffs between 25% and 40% on items originating from Indonesia, Bangladesh, Thailand, South Africa, and Malaysia, potentially impacting trade relations and economic stability in those nations. Turning to Indonesia, the newly imposed U.S. tariffs, ranging from 25% to 40%, on its exported goods could significantly affect its manufacturing sector. The Indonesian government is likely evaluating strategies to mitigate these effects, possibly including seeking alternative markets or negotiating trade concessions. Neighboring Bangladesh also faces similar challenges with the new U.S. tariffs. The country's garment industry, a major export sector, is particularly vulnerable, potentially leading to job losses and economic disruption if mitigation efforts are not successful. In Southeast Asia, Thailand is also grappling with the implications of the U.S. tariffs. Thai exporters are assessing the competitive landscape and exploring ways to offset the increased costs, such as improving efficiency or diversifying their product offering. Shifting to Africa, South Africa now confronts the challenge of navigating the newly imposed U.S. tariffs. The South African government is likely engaging in discussions with U.S. trade representatives to seek clarification and explore potential avenues for relief. Lastly, Malaysia, another nation affected by the U.S. tariffs, is considering its response. The Malaysian government may explore appealing the tariffs through international trade bodies or seeking bilateral negotiations to protect its economic interests. Germany has taken diplomatic action by summoning the Chinese ambassador. This follows an incident in the Red Sea. A Chinese warship allegedly targeted a German military aircraft with a laser. The incident occurred during a European Union mission. Ukraine is receiving increased U.S. military aid, announced by President Trump, which has sparked cautious optimism among Ukrainians. Some citizens expressed gratitude. Others remain skeptical, citing the perceived inconsistency of Trump's policies. The aid package's specific contents and long-term implications are still under review by analysts. Greece recently faced extreme heat, leading authorities to close the Acropolis in Athens for several hours on Tuesday. This measure protected tourists and workers from the dangerous conditions at the popular site. European Union trade discussions are reportedly progressing well, according to former President Trump, hinting at a forthcoming tariff decision. Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, emphasized that Europe confronts a multitude of crises, including Russia's war in Ukraine. She also noted migration, Middle Eastern instability, trade disputes, and the ever-present threat of terrorism as crucial challenges. Tunisia's political landscape sees further turbulence as a court-sentenced opposition leader, Rachid Ghannouchi, the 86-year-old figurehead of the Ennahda party, to a 14-year prison term, escalating concerns about the suppression of dissent under President Said's administration. This recent action is coupled with similar severe sentences handed down to a former prime minister and a former presidential advisor. Singapore's healthcare system faces scrutiny as a major insurer suspends pre-treatment approval for policyholders seeking medical care at 2 private hospitals, citing concerns over escalating costs. The insurer's move has sparked calls for adjustments to the healthcare insurance system in the city-state. France is set to become home to a new rare earths factory in La Rochelle. The factory's exact purpose and construction timeline are currently unspecified, leaving questions about its potential impact unanswered. Turning our attention to Sweden, their unique approach to well-being has garnered attention. The specific strategies and policies that contribute to this well-being remain unspecified, leaving the exact methods unclear. Italy is grappling with public anger after a police bloodhound died from ingesting food deliberately laced with nails. A criminal investigation is underway. Flights at Bergamo Airport were briefly halted due to an incident involving a person who allegedly accessed the tarmac and was drawn into an aircraft engine. Solomon Islands saw the safe return of 5 students who were caught amidst the recent conflict between Israel and Iran. Separately, a New Zealand animal charity assisted in relocating 2 saltwater crocodiles who had been confined to a concrete pit for 25 years to a more suitable sanctuary. Turning to Fiji, 13 Fijian students similarly returned home, unharmed, after being caught in the crossfire of the Israel-Iran conflict. Bulgaria is preparing to adopt the euro on January 1, 2026. This move will make Bulgaria the 21st member of the Eurozone, marking a significant step in its economic integration with Europe. The country has been working to meet the necessary economic criteria for adoption. Pakistan anticipates increased water scarcity as the Indus Waters Treaty faces uncertainty. India has suspended the treaty, accusing Pakistan of involvement in an April attack. Pakistan refutes these claims, alleging that India is weaponizing water by leveraging the treaty for political pressure. In Armenia, a physical altercation occurred in the National Assembly involving an opposition member of parliament. Subsequently, the lawmaker was stripped of parliamentary immunity and now faces legal prosecution for publicly advocating the removal of President Nikol Pashinyan from office. Following a period of intense summer heat, the Balkan region has been impacted by severe weather events. Croatia experienced a destructive hailstorm that caused significant damage to trees and roofs. Simultaneously, hundreds of wildfires have erupted across neighboring Serbia. Emperor Naruhito of Japan met with the president of Mongolia during a visit to the landlocked Asian nation. This visit signifies a move towards strengthening diplomatic ties between the 2 democracies. In Nigeria's Central Plateau state, an armed group ambushed village self-defense groups, resulting in the deaths of at least 40 people. The Red Cross reported this incident as a weekend ambush and related attack. Authorities in eastern Libya denied entry to 3 European ministers and the EU Commissioner for Migration, citing alleged entry violation. These individuals were subsequently ordered to be deported. Near Tripoli, Lebanon, a strike resulted in 3 fatalities. Israel has claimed responsibility, stating that the strike targeted a Hamas militant. This marks the first such Israeli strike in northern Lebanon since a recent escalation of tensions. The trial has commenced in Slovakia for a man accused of attempting to assassinate Slovakia's Prime Minister, Robert Fico, in an attack that occurred last year. In Egypt, a fire broke out at a Telecom Egypt building located in downtown Cairo. The incident resulted in the deaths of 4 employees and injuries to 26 others. The cabinet of Thailand has decided to withdraw a contentious bill that aimed to legalize casinos within the country. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.